Welcome to the Writer's Dream. We are having another exciting episode here at LTV. You can see our show here at LTV. Just click on the videos. You can also see us on YouTube. Just look for my name, Linda Maria Frank, and you'll see lots and lots of videos with lots and lots of interviews of very, very interesting Long Island authors. If you are interested in how a book becomes a book, then I suggest that you take a look at some of those shows. We're also on Cablevision Channel 20 Long Island, and that's on Friday at 3 o'clock. So without further ado, let me introduce our first guest today, and she is Joan Coster. And Joan is an award-winning author of fiction and nonfiction in the fields of art, anthropology, education, and history, and without a doubt, an adventurous. Okay. She has written a Forgotten Women series. Today's book is Prairie Cinderella. Here we go. Beautiful book, beautiful cover. Okay, and it is the story of sculptress Vinnie Ream. So welcome, Joan. Are you having fun writing these books?
I am. This is what I love doing. I love doing the research. I love learning about these amazing women who seem to have been passed over in history, and it's just a great way to reach other people and tell them about these women, and also inspire us in some ways too.
Okay, I noticed that you have, this is a series. There are two others, uh, uh, That Dickens Girl and Censored Angel, Anthony Comstock's Nemesis. Where did you find these women?
Okay, well, the first book which I wrote was The Dickinson Girl. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that's her actual photograph. And she was an orator during the American Civil War. She was the most popular and most photographed woman in the United States. Her picture was even on tea bag tags, if you can
Wow, a
believe
tea
that.
bag.
And she spoke all over. She actually made a fortune speaking um, over her lifetime. But she was the first woman hired by the Republican Party to campaign for them.
Ah, maybe the
So
Democrats need her
she
today.
was the first. She was also the first woman to address Congress. And not only did she address Congress, she made them pay to attend her speech. And then she donated all the money to the Freedmen's Society. She was an abolitionist, and she was a really strong campaigner to get men to sign up to be in the army at the time. So that's Anna Dickinson. And I came across her when I was doing research for my very first novel, which isn't published yet, but will be someday. I had written a novel. I pitched it to Penguin and all of the major editors, and every single one of them said, "You cannot sell a book set in the North." It was set in the North. It was set here in my own hometown because only half the people will buy it. The people in the South won't buy a book set in the North. They said, but if you write about a real person, it'll do okay. So that's why I went and looked up Anna Dickinson, because she had actually appeared in that first book, and I had done research on her. So that's how I ended up writing that book. And then the next woman I found was Ida Craddock, that very interesting woman. She was a mystic marriage counselor at a time when there weren't very many marriage counselors.
This is amazing because this was the time frame for this is the American Civil War, which is part of the Victorian era. Can you imagine marriage counseling in the Victorian era?
Exactly.
That's why you chose her. I'm going to read that book.
Okay, and she got in trouble because she really liked the belly dancers at the Chicago's World Fair, and so it got her in big trouble. So she's a very interesting woman. She had an angel lover because she was a spiritualist.
Oh, very interesting. So, did you, in your research, did you find other women or these women just kind of jumped out at you?
I once I started researching Anna Dickinson, I've uncovered all kinds of interesting women. So I do have a blog under joancoster.com, and every month I publish an article about an interesting woman.
Oh, that's fabulous. Say that blog address again.
It's my name, joancoster.com.
Okay,
If you
so
go there, you'll see it.
Koster.
Yeah.
Koster. Okay,
Yeah.
great. That
Um,
that's
yeah,
something we need
I
to
have
know.
I have hundreds of them of these women I could write stories about. In
All right,
fact,
so
I'm looking for the next woman. I think it might be Alice Moore Hubbard. Have you ever heard of her?
no.
Okay. Well, she's a very interesting woman and part of the Croft movement.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm moving. Well, she's actually the same period. She lived exactly. That's what's so fascinating. These three women lived almost at the same time period. Their paths never crossed, and they all had such totally different lives.
So explain to our listeners who the WordCraft movement is, because most people don't
The
know.
Roycraft was an art. It was the first arts and crafts movement in the United States. It was located in East Aurora, New York, near Buffalo, and they established a school. She was a teacher. She taught in the school. She had very advanced knowledge about education, which is one thing that interests me as as a former teacher. And it was also a art school. It still is. They still have artists there, and you can go visit it. It's a lovely place.
You know what I find amazing is how many of these kinds of movements originated upstate New York.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Um,
Chautauqua movement, and there's a
yeah.
couple in Connecticut. It amazes me because they're always in these very kind of remote places. So, how did you start doing research to begin with?
Okay. Well, I wrote a dissertation, um, and that got me into really learning how to do research and uh, I'm coming to really love doing that part of it because the writing part is fun, but if you don't have something, you need the information to make it
That's right.
feel real to the reader.
Yes.
So you have to research the clothing, the furnishings, the weather. I have weather maps for all of those. You can actually now with the web you can find all kinds of great things. I have maps of what the weather was. So when I talk about when Anna Dickinson is giving her speech, I can tell you what the weather was on that day.
Yeah, see that is important for our listeners to hear simply because if they're setting out on writing a book, that is so important that they understand that it's not just the bare bones of the story. You really have to make it interesting and exciting. You have to use your five senses. You have to use everything around you to make it real. And my favorite writers, and I'm sure most people's favorite writers, really let you read the book and just kind of melt into that particular setting and surrounding. And it helps you to really know the character. So, yeah, I like the research too. I like the research almost better than the writing. And I write for kids. So my research, what I put in the books is not as detailed as yours because I would just lose them, but it's enough. So tell us about Vinnie Ream. Let's tell us about Prairie Cinderella.
Okay, well, when I was looking for women, I was struck by the fact that she was a sculptress at a time when very few women were artists at all, but to make monumental sculptures, very few women at her time. And what set her apart was she was not a European trained artist, which even the men had to be in that 1860s, 1870s, 1880s period. She studied under Clark Mills, who was yes a fairly well known sculptor at the time, but not a major sculptor. But he had he and his sons were all European trained, but she didn't. She was a purely American woman. She had been born in a log cabin. She was very attached to her family. They had moved to Washington, D.C. at the start of the Civil War. She was in just the right place at the right time because had talked Abraham Lincoln into letting her sculpt him. So he was assassinated, and she was the only one who had sculpted him from life.
Wow.
She was 17, 18 years old.
Is that
So
sculpture still in existence?
yes,
Where is it?
yes, she did a bust. It's. I'm trying to think. There's a copy of it at Cornell. I know that.
Okay.
Okay, there was some. There's a number of copies around. Um, so that was what fascinated me. And the other thing that fascinated me about her was how much she sacrificed for her family. In fact, the whole theme of the book is about family and what will a person do for the people they love. Because at that time, what people did, because photography was just starting,
Mm-hmm.
but if you were an important person, you wanted to have your bust done, to sit on the mantle and stare down at your grandchildren, right? So she did this bust of Lincoln, and her little business, so to speak, took off. First, she did medallions. She was earning $15 a piece for these medallions, which was a fair amount of money for the time. Sure. But her family was very poor. And so, she was thinking more about earning money. But what she really wanted to do was creative neoclassical sculptures. But she was always having to produce something to sell. And I felt very close to that, because in my own life, I have a degree in art, and my husband and I started a sheep farm in upstate New York. And I had the wool, and we weren't making a lot of money, but we had the wool. So I wove the wool. I had learned how to weave in Greece doing ethnography. I mean, this is my very interesting life. And I wove the wool. I actually took it to a store in Woodstock, New York, and they actually bought it what I had woven. And I was like, I can make money doing this. So I took my art knowledge and made it also a way to earn a living and support my family, which was what she was doing as well.
It's actually amazing. I love to read books about really the end of the Victorian era, the turn of the last century, because women did do amazing things, but they had to hide themselves under a bucket so that the man in their life wouldn't feel threatened by it. And but they were all, the power behind the throne and all of that kind of stuff. But it was amazing to see the evolution of women at that time. And finally they got control of their own property, and took a long time to get control of their children if there was a divorce. I mean, I would like the young women of today to really read about that and understand the rights that they have and the ones that they need to protect. But on another topic, how did you get your first break in writing?
My first break?
Yeah.
Oh, my first break. I was teaching a college course, and the publisher of the textbook called me up and asked me how I liked the textbook. They do that,
Yes.
to find out how the textbook is going. And I told them that my students hated it. They had actually drawn a picture of the author and made him this wizard up little old man. He laughed and he said, "Can you write a better one?" And I said, I don't know, maybe. So I had no idea how to write a textbook. I'd never done it, never even thought about it. So I wrote up a little textbook. I illustrated it myself. I took it to Kinko's. Remember Kinko's?
Yes.
I took it to Kinko's and had it bound into a little booklet. And I sent it to him. And he calls me up and he's laughing. He says, "Nobody's ever sent a little book before." But he sent it out for review and people liked it. And I got the contract.
Wow.
And he said, "Got 12 months to write the textbook." Well, at the end of 12 months, I had 8 chapters done. I had a lot of things going on in between. I was running a sheep farm and everything else. The electric went out and I lost a chapter. It was interesting. And I called him up and said, I can't finish. I only have 8 chapters. And he laughed. He said, nobody writes a textbook in 12 months, but I wanted to see if you could. So I wrote the textbook, and that was my big break in writing. And it was a very, very well accepted textbook. It sold very, very well, still sells. And that's how I started writing.
That's
and when I
great.
retired, I thought, I'd like to write fiction instead. Because when you write a textbook, you're writing all the time. You
Mhm.
just finish an edition and you're writing the next edition. So I was used to writing every day.
Mhm.
I would get up at 5 in the morning and write till 7 every single day,
Yeah,
Saturdays, Sundays, every day. So I was used to it. So I thought I'll write fiction. And that's where I wrote my first novel.
that's wonderful. No, that's really a great story. And that was a piece of advice that I found in many places when I decided to write a book, because I was a teacher for many years. I taught science and forensic science, and I love Nancy Drew. So I said, I'm going to write mystery stories for kids. And of course, I had to do a lot of research on how to do that, because I didn't even know where to put the quotation marks in the dialogue. So I had to learn a lot. But the advice I got was write something for one of your teacher journals, and then you can say you're published. And then when you send this to a publisher, you can say you're published. Well, I never did that, and I self-published. So here we are. Anyway, so
I think that's fine.
yeah, well, it is
I
what it
think it's
is.
great now that we can all, get
Mhm.
our words and books out. And I should point out that all my books, the proceeds are donated to the Freedom to Read Foundation. I don't make any profit on these books because I have to say the textbook was was great. So the books I write are for are donated. They're all donated.
Oh, that's really wonderful, especially right now. I know one of the people in one of my writing associations just handed out yesterday a way to lobby against um, banning books. So this is something that's important. What I like to do is I have a couple of reviews from your books, and I like to read them because they're very nice.
Okay.
I notice that you use readers' favorites. So do I. I love them. They really write a nice review. It seems like they really, get into it. So the first one is a short one. It says, offers a masterful blend of historical detail and human drama that will captivate readers interested in art history, and the triumph of the human spirit. And the second one is a little longer. Joan Coster's first person narrative conveys the essence of the period, blending historical accuracy with vivid, imaginative details. The character of Vinnie is carefully developed, embodying the struggles of women during a time when their roles and expectations were changing rapidly. The narrative is educational and engaging, highlighting the historical significance of the Gilded Age through the eyes of a strong female protagonist. Coster's research is apparent in every detail, from the settings to the historical figures who appear throughout the story. At the end of the book, Coster includes a glossary of each historical figure's life. Prairie Cinderella is a tribute to the forgotten women who played pivotal roles during a defining period in American history. Readers of historical fiction about Readers of historical fiction about strong, determined women won't want to miss Vinnie's journey. And again, why did you call it Prairie Cinderella?
Well, I actually didn't make that up. She was called Prairie Cinderella. That's
Okay.
one of her things that they called her in the press. The reason being that she did come from a log cabin. She had grown up on the prairie, and again, she was American trained, so it seemed to make sense. They also called her America 1871 because when she was the first woman to get a commission from the United States government to make a sculpture. So her sculpture of Lincoln is in the rotunda, and it was a major happening at the time. I went to the unveiling of this sculpture was covered in all the newspapers in the country.
That's great. Yeah. What
Yeah.
a, so many interesting women. But I also noticed that you have a pen name, Zara West. Zara
Yes.
West. And you have a
Yes,
blog.
I have another whole persona. I when I started writing, and I had tried to, I was trying to sell the I was pitching the historical fiction book and not getting the responses I wanted. And I went and looked at, well, what's the most popular genre out there? And it was romance. And romantic suspense seemed to be a popular genre. So I said, I'll write a romantic suspense. Well, I wrote that romantic suspense. I pitched it to the first publisher and they took it.
Wow.
Yeah, the first editor took it. So I went on to write 4 of those series. They're a lot of fun. They also have research. There's a lot of research in romance, contemporary romance. My characters were tattoo artists and graffiti artists in New York City and Brooklyn, where I was born. And it was kind of in Williamsburg. I was born in Williamsburg. It was kind of fun. My ancestors were settled in Williamsburg, so it was fun to go back to see. I actually went to see where my great grandfather had his house. There's still parts of it left. So it was a lot of fun to do that, and then to research the contemporary graffiti. And I'm interested in art, so it was very interesting to research the graffiti artist culture. So those are romantic suspenses. They're very exciting. I discovered that you have to have a murder. I didn't know that. You have to have a murder in a romantic suspense. So there are murders, and but there's also I think there's some social information in them too, social ideas.
The names of the books are Beneath the Skin, Close to the Skin, Within the Skin, and Under the Skin. Anything about skin. Okay.
Well, it's a tattoo artist.
How do your readers respond to your stories? Do you get any feedback that you can talk about? I mean, what do you hear from your readers?
Well, I think I've had almost everyone who's read it has responded very positively, particularly to Prairie Cinderella, which is the newest one, obviously. I had one reviewer wrote that they thought Vinnie Ream would be very happy with this adaptation of her life. And I thought that really reached me, because that was one of my goals. Because one of the things I saw was a video of a contemporary historian, I won't say his name, talking about Vinnie Ream. And he kept doing this thing like, well, we all know what she did to get that commission. That kind of thing that they do to women. And it made me so angry. Because instead of talking about the fact that she was talented and that how hard she worked. I mean, she worked really hard to create these things in a situation where she didn't have the background and the money that some other people might have had, and he was denigrating her. So I thought that was a really special thing that somebody had said. And I do have several book clubs that are reading it, and they've been very positive as well. It's a really good book club book. There's a lot you can talk about. I have questions at the back that they can answer.
That's excellent. Okay, we have about almost 3 minutes left. So I have 3 questions for you. One of them is, what was the most rewarding part of all your writing experiences? What was the worst? And any advice? So
okay, what was my rewarding part? I think the rewarding part I have all the time is when I have that book and I can hold it in my hands. It's such a feeling of satisfaction to know that other people will be able to share with what I've learned and discovered. I don't think anything replaces that. So every time I open the box of books, it's an amazing feeling. And the second question, I forgot.
The worst. What was the worst experience?
The worst.
I hope you didn't have any worse.
Well, I think the worst was when I lost the whole book.
Oh dear.
With the computers and changing over computers.
Oh no.
Yeah, I kind of lost a whole book. So you kind of put it out of your mind. And I discovered you can't rewrite. When I lost the chapter of my textbook, the new chapter I wrote was not the same at all. It was like a totally different thing. Mm-hmm. You can't seem to rewrite what you've already written once. So that was the worst for sure.
Well, your brain moves on. Your brain moves on.
Yes.
You can't help your brain. You can't stop it. It just moves on. And I'd like to know if you have any advice and what's your next project. 1 minute.
Okay, well, my advice to anyone who wants to write a book is, first of all, don't worry about whether you know the punctuation or the grammar or anything else. Okay? Get your ideas. If you need to do research, do your research, and then just sit down and write. I do something called fast drafting. In fact, I teach a course in it, which once you have everything in your head that you think you want to write, you sit down and you just keep writing and writing and writing. Because if you don't write anything, you don't have anything you can fix. But everything you put down on paper can be fixed,
That's
especially
great.
now with AI.
Exactly. And your next book is?
Well, as I said, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do Alice Moore Hubbard.
That's right.
Um,
You said.
you have, when you pick a person to write about, a real person, you have to see if there's a dramatic element to their story. And she
Okay.
had some really dramatic elements. So
Okay.
I
It
think it'll
was
be an interesting book.
an absolute pleasure interviewing you.